Recently, Sicko's committee on Twitter used AI to create every president as a college football head coach. The thread is glorious, link below. But it got me thinking, what would each president actually be like as a college football head coach? Let's find out. The first head coach in the history of college football, George Washington was a revolutionary innovator on the field. He brilliantly came up with plays such as the crossing the Delaware, a running play which requires all 11 of his players to get in an ice-cold boat and row their way across the field. After he led a huge upset victory of the British in 1776, Coach Washington achieved legendary status in the football world and America. A short-lived coach for the Harvard Crimson, John Adams, was doing well when he devised the offense known as the Federalist Papers, which placed a strong emphasis on the overall team and not the individual players. Early in his coaching career, he would suffer a huge loss dubbed the Boston Massacre, when the British absolutely murdered his squad. A very controversial coach, Thomas Jefferson, did help his school secede from the British Conference, writing an epic Declaration of Independence which established the ACC, which back then was simply known as the United States. Jefferson was a decent coach, however, he was known to, mistreat the black members of his staff. The first player coach on this list, James Madison, played at the school he named after himself. As part of the squad that helped in the first U.S. National Championship in 1776, Madison was known more as a coordinator than a head coach. He took a massive L against Canada when they not only beat his squad on the field, they literally burned his house down. Monroe was an above-average head coach, but that's all we really know about him. But he was an innovator in terms of defense, coming up with the Monroe Doctrine, a stout defensive scheme designed to keep European-style offenses out of his secondary. Most say nepotism got John Quincy Adams the job as head coach at Harvard, as his dad was also the coach there. An old curmudgeon of a head coach, Adams was rigid and unforgiving. He was fired after only 4 years on the job. A literal war hero, Jackson was known for his exploits on the field and his overwhelming slaughters against teams like the Florida State Seminoles. Trust me, if you played against one of Jackson's teams, you were sent off in a trail of tears. Is it too soon to make these jokes? Fuck it, this video is going out. A man who was small in stature, Van Buren was only 5'6", was an inept head coach who took a lot of L's. During his time as coach, attendance and revenue was down. Just look at him. William Henry Harrison's head coaching tenure did not go well. Before his very first game, he delivered a long-winded pregame speech to his players during a rainstorm. Because the speech was so long, kickoff was delayed 30 minutes, and Harrison got a cold. And back in the day, if you got a cold, you just fucking died. And that's what he did. After Harrison died, special teams coordinator John Tyler was awarded the head coaching job. Even though he was really old and didn't know how to run a football team. He was fired as soon as they could. Fun fact, he actually has living grandsons even though he died in 1845. Polk isn't all that well known as a head coach, though he did earn a conference title when he defeated the defunct Mexican Conference in the Mexican-American rivalry of the 1840s. Zachary Taylor is one of several head coaches on this list to die while coaching. In 1850, his team took a loss so bad he couldn't stomach it, and he died only after 16 months as head coach. His nickname was Old Rough and Ready, same as your mom. The old crusty head coach, as he was known, Millard Fillmore, will go down in history as that one head coach with the weird, kind of funny name. A known racist, Pierce is one of those head coaches we don't talk about that much for good reason. He didn't win a single game as head coach. An older coach, Buchanan advocated for schools to have more power than their conferences. He wasn't a memorable head coach at all, unlike this next guy. The head coach who led his team through one of the toughest stretches in our country's history. Abraham Lincoln was not only successful on the field, but he kept all of college football from being torn apart because of an issue with conference rights. Or they claim that it was about slavery. Despite being a Northerner, he was known for his success against both Alabama and Georgia, thoroughly torching them on the way to his one and only national championship, one that's still talked about today. After the loss, some butthurt Southern Conference fans couldn't take it and they shot him in the back of the head while he was watching a play. After Lincoln got shot, Andrew Johnson took over as a head coach, and nobody liked this guy. It was so bad they even held a special committee meeting to get him fired, but in the end he wasn't. One of Abraham Lincoln's star players, Ulysses S. Grant, spent his entire time as a head coach drunk, often saw delusions of grandeur, and showed up to coach wearing his uniform from his playing days. Grant would be so drunk he didn't even know the score of the game, and he let his coordinators call plays, except they were just stealing money from the university. Grant was one of those great players, horrible coaches. Another star player turned head coach, Hayes was known mostly for his killer beard and sideline attire. Garfield took over as head coach of the Buckeyes, but threatened to make compromises with Michigan, so somebody shot him and he was, well, fired. These next few head coaches are pretty boring, so let's just run through them real quick. Chester A. Arthur took over for Garfield after he was fired, didn't do much as a coach. Grover Cleveland was the only two-time head coach on this list, took 4 years off in between his first coaching gig. And William McKinley waged war against the Spanish Conference and then was shot and killed despite signing a 4-year contract extension. Man, fans are tough sometimes. An on-field hero when his team defeated a foreign squad from Spain, Teddy Roosevelt was a legend both as a coach and as a player. He was known to wrestle bears, wrestle other men, fight bears, live out in the wilderness with nothing but a buck knife, and overall just be a man's man. He would often do the Oklahoma drill against his own players with nothing on but his jockstrap and proceed to hit every one of them into a sad fit of crying and weakness. He is literally on Mount Rushmore. William Howard Taft is known less for his coaching, but more for having a Mark Mangino-style physique. In fact, the only thing that he is remembered for is that he was once late for the coin toss because he was so fat he got stuck in a bathtub. Woodrow Wilson did win a world championship, but had a lot of help doing so. But after a committee review, it was mostly regarded as a draw, and his role has been greatly diminished in history. Wilson tried to form his own college football conference, the League of Nations. However, nobody took it seriously. They did name a bridge that always has traffic on it after him. Harding got the job at Ohio State because he looked dignified and respectable. However, he wasn't that great of a head coach. He was also old and died right there on the sideline one game. One of the coolest head coaches ever, Calvin Coolidge, was known for his quiet head coaching style and calm demeanor. Too bad right after he left coaching, college football turned to shit. Hoover has the dishonor of having to coach during the Great Depression, where nobody really gave a shit about college football. Much like Iowa's offense today, nothing moved and people just sat around hoping things would get better, but they didn't. He was a below average coach. Now, here's the ones you've been waiting for. The longest tenured head coach in the history of head coaching, FDR was coach for like 86 years. Known for patrolling the sidelines in his wheelchair, yeah, I'm canceled. FDR was a player's coach through and through. After many tough battles against every conference in the world, including that pesky Germany, FDR died while coaching. Harry Truman was an innovator in college football, coming up with the play known as the bomb, which he dropped twice on an opponent with devastating consequences. The play was so effective, just the threat of using it nowadays sends chills up an opponent's spine. Yeah, I am canceled. After playing for the Army, Dewey, as he was known, also coached there. He is generally regarded as a good coach, and his team was successful during his reign. One of the most famous coaches ever, JFK was known for giving rousing pregame speeches and getting a lot out of his players. While he was coaching, he was a bit of a playboy, having an affair with Marilyn Monroe. After a major beef with his school rival, the Reds, he was unliked by many other international schools. While coaching in Dallas, JFK was shot in the back of the head, and his coaching career was effectively over. To this day, people argue whether the CIA the KGB or the NCAA had him shot. Known as Bull Johnson or LBJ, he was an older coach who was hired on an airplane because his boss had just gotten shot in the fucking head. A longtime coach, he was known for his poor strategies on and off the field, causing a lot of injuries to his players and deaths. Nixon's coaching career started off really well, winning his first 18 games and not seeing many challengers. What cost him dearly was before a big game, he had his assistant coaches break into his opposing team's hotel rooms and steal their game plans. It was at the Watergate Hotel, and the scandal became known as Watergate Gate. After this was found out, Nixon was forced to resign in shame, just like Bobby Petrino or Hugh Freeze or you get it. Gerald Ford was a literal ex-football player who somehow found himself coaching and whose job it was just to wait it out until he could retire with a pension and some dignity. Jimmy Carter had a tough time as a coach, considering a bunch of his players got kidnapped in Iran and he had no clue how to get them back. Also, ticket prices soared while he was in charge, though was that really his fault? Maybe. Reagan's acting career prepared him for a role in coaching as hell. He played a coach in some movies. Surely he'd be good at it in real life. Luckily for him, his team saw success during his tenure as revenue soared. He did try to eliminate drugs in college football by having a war on drugs, where we can all safely declare drugs as the winner of the war on drugs. With a big win over the Republican Guard, you would have thought George H.W. Bush would have coached much longer. However, he fell out of favor with his team and school pretty quickly, though he really didn't do much wrong. Slick Willie, as he was known, good old Bill Clinton was a big fan of sliding past defenses and smoking cigars after every big W. Known for his aggressive coaching style, he wasn't shy to point fingers at people or explode all over them. He ended his coaching career at an even 69-69. W, as he's known, coached for 8 years and led his team to some controversial victories. Accused of only hiring his underqualified friends, Bush always had a way of somehow coming out on top. In 2000, he won a game, but it was contested, but he might not have won the game, but then it got all the way to the Supreme Court, and they say he won the game, so there you have it. The first black head coach in all of football, yes, it took that fucking long. Barack Obama is regarded as the coolest head coach of all time. After scoring a decisive surprise victory against longtime rival OBL, Obama has enjoyed a successful post-coaching career. The only coach on this list to get his job because the other candidate was hated by literally everyone, Donald Trump. And that's all I have to say about his head coaching career. And our last head coach on this list. Joe Biden is the 46th head coach on this list. We all here hope that he is aware that he is the head coach of this team, and we need him to do his job to the best of his ability. He does indeed look like an old college head coach in all of these photos. Well, I hope you enjoyed my last video, as I'm likely canceled after this. I'm 5 Points Dudes, and you made it to my next video.